The studio lights blazed across the polished stage as millions of viewers tuned in to the nation's most-watched political talk show, Night Forum. At the center sat Ethan Cole, a host famous for his razor-sharp wit and unapologetic commentary. Tonight's guest needed no introduction. President Donald J. Trump, whose appearance promised sparks and tension. Ethan leaned back in his chair, a sly grin on his face as the cameras went live. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the most talked-about man in America, President Donald J. Trump. The audience applauded politely, though a few smirks hinted at the fireworks they expected. Trump nodded firmly, hands folded on the desk. Thank you, Ethan. Glad to be here. From the sidelines, Melania Trump observed in quiet poise. She wasn't scheduled to speak, only to support her husband, but her calm presence carried an unmistakable air of strength. Her eyes, however, moved with subtle caution, scanning the room. Ethan wasted no time. Mr. President, some say your policies are outdated, your speech is entertaining at best. What do you say to critics who claim your leadership is more comedy than governance? Soft laughter rippled through the audience. Trump didn't flinch. I say they're wrong. I am here to serve the American people, not to impress TV pundits. Ethan smirked, clearly setting the stage for confrontation. Melania's gaze sharpened. She knew this tone wasn't a respectful debate. The air in the studio grew heavy as millions waited to see if this would be a clash of egos or something deeper. For 10 tense minutes, Ethan fired rapid questions laced with sarcasm about veterans, farmers, and Trump's communication style. Each barb drew scattered chuckles from the crowd. Then Ethan leaned in with a theatrical pause. Mr. President, when you say make America great again, do you mean back when typewriters were cutting edge? Because half your speeches sound like they're from the 1950s. The audience burst into laughter. Ethan reclined, triumphant. Trump remained steady, arms folded. Sometimes the oldest truths are the strongest, he replied. Respect for hard work, faith, and family, those never go out of style. Ethan pressed on with a grin. You've got a way with words, Mr. President, almost like a stand-up comic pretending to be commander-in-chief. The laughter this time was sharper, louder. Cameras caught Trump's unwavering stare, but they also caught Melania. Her lips pressed into a firm line, her eyes glimmering with something unreadable. Though the room erupted with laughter, her silent presence radiated stillness. Viewers at home noticed it too. Her expression wasn't mere disapproval, it was a quiet warning. The audience began to sense it. The energy shifted. Ethan, enjoying his control of the room, turned to the cameras. You see, folks, this is why we love having the president on pure entertainment. But the audience, moments ago roaring, began to settle. Their eyes drifted toward Melania, seated elegantly at the side. She hadn't moved or spoken, but her composed, almost regal stillness seemed to command attention. Trump answered calmly, entertainment is fine, but leadership is about listening, protecting, and delivering results. America deserves more than jokes. Melania's gaze never wavered. In the control room, producers exchanged anxious glances. On social media, screenshots of her face spread like wildfire. Hashtags like hashtag MELANIA, look, and hashtag silent reaction began trending within minutes. Ethan sensed the room slipping away. He chuckled nervously. What's wrong, folks? Losing our sense of humor? Trump allowed a faint smile. Maybe they're realizing some things aren't as funny as you think. The audience shifted uncomfortably. The balance of power was changing and it wasn't in Ethan's favor. Desperate to regain control, Ethan tried again. I hear your rallies last longer than Broadway shows. Do people bring snacks or just pillows? The audience laughed, but softer now. Before Trump could reply, a new voice cut through the tension. Melania leaned forward, her calm, accented voice carrying across the room like a clear bell. Ethan, laughter is easy. Respect is harder. The studio froze. She wasn't supposed to speak. Ethan blinked, momentarily thrown off. Oh, Mrs. Trump cared to elaborate. She nodded gracefully. When a man dedicates his time to serving a country, even if you disagree, is not comedy. It is sacrifice. Military families, farmers, workers, they wait for someone to hear them. Mocking that is not humor. It dismisses their struggle. Her words were soft but undeniable. The audience, once entertained, now sat in reflective silence. Ethan shifted in his seat, his trademark grin faltering. Trump glanced at his wife, a rare softness crossing his features. Her words weren't about defending him, they defended the dignity of the people he represented. For the first time, the show felt less like a late-night spectacle and more like a reckoning. Viewers across the country felt the same stillness seep into their living rooms. Ethan tried to recover. Strong words, Mrs. Trump, but humor is part of free speech. Surely you're not against that. Melania met his eyes. Free speech is precious, but using it to belittle others, especially those who look for hope, what does that build? The question hung heavy. A man in military uniform nodded quietly. His wife squeezed his hand. Then, a middle-aged woman in the audience stood, voice trembling. My son serves in the Navy. When you joked earlier, it didn't feel funny. It felt like you were laughing at his service. The room went still again. Ethan swallowed hard. This wasn't the reaction he'd expected. Melania turned toward the woman. Your son is a hero. His courage deserves honor, not ridicule. Tears welled in the woman's eyes as the audience offered a quiet, sincere round of applause, different from the laughter Ethan was used to. Trump finally spoke, leaning forward. That's what she's saying. Ethan, we can debate, we can disagree, but we do not laugh at sacrifice. What began as a light-hearted spar had transformed into something profound. The host, known for his biting humor, now faced a crowd that was no longer with him. They were listening to her. Melania's voice carried a weight no debate point could match. Words always land somewhere, she added softly. We choose whether they wound or heal. The cameras kept rolling. But the night belonged to her. Ethan's eyes drifted to the veteran in the audience, then to the woman who had spoken earlier. Their expressions weren't angry, they were disappointed. Somehow, that stung more than outrage. Across the table, President Trump remained composed, almost unusually so, as if he instinctively knew this was no longer his battle to fight. His wife had quietly claimed the moment. Behind the cameras, the production crew whispered in disbelief. Did she just flip the whole show? One murmured, I've never seen anything like this. Another replied. Ethan shifted in his chair, finally letting out a slow sigh. All right, Mrs. Trump, he said, his voice softer now. Maybe there's something to what you're saying, but people watch shows like mine for a reason. They want relief, humor, a break from the seriousness of life. Melania tilted her head slightly, her poise unshaken. Relief, she said gently, should never come at the expense of dignity. The audience erupted in applause, louder this time. Ethan felt the walls closing in. He was cornered in the very arena where he had always ruled. Meanwhile, producers noticed the network's live chat exploding with messages. I never thought I'd agree with Melania Trump, but she's absolutely right. This isn't about politics, it's about respect. I'm crying. She said what I've always wanted to say backstage. A producer's phone buzzed. It was a text from Ethan's wife, watching the broadcast live. Her message was blunt. Stop laughing. Listen to her. She's right. The producer hesitated, then slipped the phone to Ethan during a commercial break. Ethan read it quickly, his face palling slightly. His own wife had sided with Melania. When the show resumed, Ethan's energy was noticeably different. Mrs. Trump, he began carefully, what you're asking for is kindness. But do you really think that's realistic in today's world of politics and media? Melania gave a gentle nod. Kindness is always realistic, she replied. It is the only thing that outlives the headlines. The audience applauded again, longer and more heartfelt than before. Even Trump, normally eager to dominate any stage, simply watched his wife with quiet admiration. Something remarkable was unfolding, something no one had anticipated. Melania leaned forward slightly, her eyes sweeping the audience. When I came to this country, she said softly, I saw its greatness, not in power, but in its people, farmers, soldiers, mothers, children. They give every day. Too often their voices are lost in noise. Tonight, I only wish to remind you, every voice matters. Her words fell like a steady rain, soaking into every heart in the room. Several audience members nodded, some discreetly wiping away tears. Trump added in a low, steady tone, that's why I fight the way I do. Not for headlines, but for them. Ethan sat silently, his usual quick wit deserting him. Something in Melania's words had cracked his armor. From the back of the room, a young man raised his hand. My dad lost his job 2 years ago, he said hesitantly. We laugh about it sometimes to cope, but when people on TV laugh, it feels different. It feels like they don't care. Melania's gaze softened. Coping through laughter is different, she said. That is healing. But mocking others, especially those already hurting, that is cruelty disguised as humor. The audience clapped once more, the sound heavier with meaning. The night had transformed from a televised debate into something far deeper. Ethan realized, perhaps for the first time, that his jokes may have cost more than he'd ever acknowledged. Meanwhile, social media was ablaze. Clips of Melania's remarks spread across platforms in minutes. TikTok videos with captions like when the First Lady silences the room racked up millions of views. Major news outlets cut into their broadcasts to replay the moment. Pundits who usually pounced on anything Trump-related found themselves unexpectedly speechless or in rare agreement. Inside the studio, the gravity of the moment was unmistakable. Producers whispered urgently, this isn't what we planned, but it's gold. The ratings are skyrocketing. Trump leaned back, faintly amused. He had weathered countless interviews, but never one where the spotlight shifted so completely and effortlessly to his wife. Ethan, on the other hand, fidgeted. For the first time in his career, he wasn't driving the conversation. Trying to recover, Ethan cleared his throat. Mrs. Trump, he admitted, I didn't expect this discussion tonight, but maybe that's the lesson. Sometimes the most important truths arrive when we least expect them. Melania offered a small, serene smile. Yes, she said softly, and sometimes silence teaches more than words. That line struck the deepest chord yet. The audience broke into a standing ovation, their applause rolling like a wave. The viral moment had just been sealed in history. As the applause faded, Ethan leaned forward again, his usual bravado gone. His voice was lower, almost vulnerable. "Can I be honest for a moment?" The audience quieted instantly. Ethan rarely dropped his on-air persona. "I built this show on laughs," he confessed, "on making light of things, but hearing you tonight, I realize, maybe I've been laughing at the wrong things. Maybe I've used humor as a shield." A soft murmur rippled through the crowd. Trump raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Melania simply nodded. "Acknowledgement," she said gently, "is the first step toward change." Ethan let out a small, nervous chuckle, this time without mockery. "I never thought I'd learn humility on my own stage." Trump smirked lightly. "Happens to the best of us." The audience laughed with them warmly, sincerely. For the first time all night, the laughter felt genuine and unifying. Ethan leaned back, shaking his head in disbelief. "You know," he said, "I think tonight will be remembered for a long time. And not because of me but because of you, Mrs. Trump." Melania lowered her gaze modestly. "It is not about me," she replied. "It is about remembering that words can heal." As the show neared its scheduled end, the producers received a message from the network. The ratings were higher than they had been in years. The network wanted to extend the broadcast by another half hour. Ethan announced it live. "Folks, we've been asked to continue this special segment, and honestly, I think we all need it." The audience cheered softly, eager for more. During the next break, a staffer approached Ethan. "There's a caller on the line," she said. "She says it's urgent." Normally, Ethan avoided live calls, but tonight felt different. He nodded. When the line opened, a shaky voice filled the studio. "My name is Karen," the woman said. "My husband was a firefighter. He died last year. When people joke about leaders and service, it feels like his sacrifice doesn't matter. But tonight, hearing Mrs. Trumpet gave me peace." The studio fell silent. Even Ethan's eyes glistened. "Karen," he said softly, "thank you for sharing. I think we all needed to hear that." Trump leaned toward the mic. "Your husband was a hero. America is safer because of him. Never forget that." Melania added gently, "His courage lives through you." The caller's quiet sobs came through the speakers before the line disconnected. The show no longer felt like a talk program, it felt like a collective moment of healing. Backstage, crew members whispered among themselves. "My dad always said words don't matter much," said Daniel, a young camera operator, eyes misty. "But watching this, I think they matter more than anything." A seasoned producer nodded, voice thick with emotion. "I've worked on this show for 10 years. I've never seen anything like this. People aren't laughing, they're feeling." Even Trump's security detail exchanged surprised looks. They were used to tension and confrontation. Tonight felt like history in the making. Back on stage, Melania sat with the same calm grace as before. She rarely smiled, but when she did, it carried a quiet warmth. Ethan leaned toward her once more. "Mrs. Trump, you've spoken so much about respect and sacrifice. Do you think America has lost its way?" Melania paused before answering. "Not lost," she said finally, "just distracted. We chase entertainment, headlines, outrage, but beneath it all, the values are still here. Families still love, workers still labor, soldiers still serve. We only need to remember." The audience rose again in heartfelt applause. This time, even Ethan joined in. Behind the curtain, Daniel whispered to a colleague, voice trembling with awe. "This isn't just a show," he said. "This is a wake-up call." Though he had spoken little that evening, Trump finally leaned forward and embraced the moment. "You know, Ethan," he said calmly, "I've been called a lot of things in my life. But after hearing what my wife just said, I think she expressed it better than I ever could. Leadership isn't easy. You get mocked, you get attacked, but if people remember the values behind what we do, then maybe all the criticism is worth it." Ethan nodded. His sharpness softened. "Do you ever get tired of being laughed at?" Trump gave a small shrug. "You learn to live with it, but when the laughter distracts people from the seriousness of what we're trying to accomplish, that's when it crosses the line." Beside him, Melania gently placed her hand over his rare, unplanned gesture of tenderness that the cameras instantly caught. The audience let out a soft sigh, a few smiling at the sight. Within minutes, social media lit up with screenshots of the moment, captions reading, "In the end, it's about partnership." Trump turned back to Ethan. "You see, this isn't just politics. It's about respect. If we lose that, we lose everything." Ethan, humbled, slowly nodded. "Maybe tonight, we've all gained some of it back." The studio grew still as Melania prepared to speak again. "When I was a young girl," she began, her voice measured and steady, "I grew up in a small town. Life was simple. My parents worked hard every day. We didn't have much, but we had dignity. That dignity came from respect for family, for neighbors, for country. When I came to this nation, I saw the same values. But I also saw how easily they can be drowned out by noise and laughter. Tonight, I only want to remind everyone, dignity is fragile. Protect it." A hush swept the studio. Even the camera crew stood motionless. Trump's expression softened, his usual bravado replaced with quiet admiration for the woman beside him. For a rare moment, he said nothing, simply listening. The silence broke into a reverent wave of applause. People rose to their feet, clapping not wildly but with deep respect. Ethan leaned back, awestruck. Mrs. Trump, he said, almost breathless. I think you've just said more in 5 minutes than I have in 5 years of shows. Melania gave a faint smile. Then perhaps tonight was worth it. The audience, who had entered expecting comedy, now sat as witnesses to something unforgettable. Ethan leaned forward once more. Mr. President, Mrs. Trump, if you could leave this audience with one message, what would it be? Trump gestured toward his wife. I think she should answer that. Melania paused, her eyes sweeping across the room. Remember this. Every person you laugh at carries a story. Every joke at someone's expense leaves a mark. Choose carefully. Build with your words. Don't break with them. Somewhere in the crowd, a man whispered, "That's going to stay with me forever." Ethan nodded slowly. That's the kind of message people are desperate to hear. Not about parties or politics, but about being human. The audience clapped again, several dabbing at their eyes. As the show neared its end, Ethan asked one last question. Mrs. Trump, you've spoken of dignity and respect, but what about forgiveness? Can someone who's made a career out of laughing at others find redemption? The room leaned in. It was clear Ethan wasn't just asking for the audience, he was asking for himself. Melania's gaze softened. Forgiveness is always possible, she said gently, but it begins with humility. You cannot ask for forgiveness while holding on to pride. Tonight, you listened. That is the first step. Ethan exhaled, his voice barely a whisper. Thank you. Trump chuckled lightly. Well, looks like you got more than an interview tonight, Ethan. The audience laughed warmly this time, not with mockery, but with healing. For the first time in years, Ethan felt lighter. As the credits began to roll, something unprecedented happened. The entire studio rose in a standing ovation, not for Ethan, not even for Trump, but for Melania. Surprised, she placed a hand over her heart. Thank you, she said softly, her words nearly drowned by the applause. Trump leaned toward her, whispering something only she could hear. Whatever it was made her smile, a rare, genuine smile. Ethan stood and joined the applause. Ladies and gentlemen, he said with quiet sincerity, tonight we've all learned a lesson not about politics, but about humanity, and for that, I am grateful. The ovation lasted long after the cameras went dark. By morning, news outlets across the country replayed the clips on a loop. Headlines read, Melania's silence silences the nation. From laughter to tears, the night had changed everything. Commentators who normally thrived on division found themselves in rare agreement. Coffee shops, classrooms, and workplaces buzzed with discussion. Parents showed their children Melania's words as an example of dignity. Teachers wove the moment into lessons about respect. Ethan's ratings soared, but for once he didn't brag. Instead, he released a simple statement. Last night, I learned that the greatest power isn't in laughter, it's in listening. Thank you, Mrs. Trump. Trump went back to his presidential duties. But everywhere he went, people brought up Melania's words, not his policies. It was a quiet shift, but a powerful one. Weeks later, Ethan invited Melania back not to talk politics, but for a special program on kindness and leadership. She agreed, with one condition: the show would highlight ordinary Americans, teachers, veterans, farmers, whose dignity deserved recognition. Ethan happily accepted. That night, stories of everyday heroes filled the airwaves. The audience laughed and cried together, not at anyone, but with them. At the close of the program, Ethan turned to Melania. You changed me. You changed this show. And in a small way, I think you changed the country. Melania shook her head gently. I did nothing. People simply remembered what was already in their hearts. The audience erupted once more, and the lesson became unmistakable. Sometimes the quietest voice speaks the loudest. Sometimes the one who says the least ends up saying the most. On the night, a host tried to laugh at Donald Trump. It was Melania's calm dignity, not outrage, that silenced a nation and reminded everyone what respect truly means.